Welcome back. You're watching India Development Debate, and the big story of the day, and we're still waiting to see what the headline out of that story is the GST Council meet where centre and states are, as we speak, thrashing out some kind of a solution to the question of who pays for the compensation cess. Now, this has been a long drawn out battle. We have seen, a couple of meetings which took place, ended in acrimony. The centre has given a couple of options. Most states have gone for it, but opposition states may want a vote. They may want to move even the Supreme Court or have a group of ministers to decide what happens next. The essential fight is about the shortfall in compensation cess, which has been caused by the pandemic. But the question is, who pays for it? Does the centre borrow? Does the state borrow? The states don't want to borrow because they're saying that they cannot really finance that, and it's the centre's prerogative to make good that shortfall. In the middle of this, are there any solutions in sight? I'm speaking now with Pratik Jain, Leader of Indirect Tax at PWC. Pratik, very good evening, and thank you for waiting with us to watch what comes out of this GST meet. This press conference was supposed to take place at 7 p.m. By then, the entire meeting and the decision was supposed to be done and dusted. It's 9:32 and no signs yet, so we can only imagine what is going on right now. But do you see an amicable solution coming out of this?
I think it will have to be worked out because really voting is not an option, because states do know that if 21 states are supporting option 1 and with centre having 33% vote, if voting were to happen, then centre would find a way, right? So, and also till now, the GST Council has taken all the decisions from consensus. So I do hope that voting will not happen, and they will find a sort of amicable solution. As we all know that earlier there was an issue that whether centre is supposed to reimburse or compensate the states only for the GST related losses, or a pandemic is also included, and then they took a view that no, the entire thing will have to be compensated. The issue is only with respect to whether who borrows and things like that. So I'm sure that they will find a solution. I mean, and the fact that they have been discussing it for a long time does suggest that solution is on the way.
The Punjab Finance Minister has said, and the government of Punjab verified Twitter handle has put this out just about 10 minutes ago, that the Punjab Finance Minister, Mr. Badal, has asked GST Council to establish a mechanism for adjudication of disputes between Government of India and states in letter and spirit, demands compensation as per law, get the law amended if needed. Now, Pratik, the point is that this has now become a political issue, and the GST Council has somehow been unscathed by the bipartisan political pulls and pushes all of these years. That cooperation has evaporated from the last few meetings. There's no two things about it. In that scenario, do you think that a majority vote can really push down the decision on opposition states, which are 10 in number right now, or will it come down to seeing who has the numbers once again in the GST Council?
Yeah, I agree that majority view, while as per what is written in the constitutional framework, will have to be accepted, because that's how the voting. If it has to happen 3/4 majority with 1/3 voting to centre, that's how the formula works. But I don't think that they will go that path, right? Because if you start going through voting, and particularly on this kind of issue, then it does not augur well for cooperative federalism that we are all talking about. Till now, centre and states have found a way to kind of work together. And in the crisis kind of situation which you have today, that's where the true leadership is tested, right? So I think they will come above the sort of party lines and find a workable solution to this. It's not an easy one, right? Because clearly, because of the pandemic, the funds position, fiscal space is not there with the centre to really compensate. It has to be done only through cess. Even if you extend the period of cess, we don't know how much time will it take to recoup the losses. And you don't have today ability to increase the cess rate or have more products in the ambit, right? Because of the economic situation that we are in. It's a complex situation. I agree that the voting perhaps is not the best solution to it, and I hope that that will not happen.
They've already decided to extend the compensation cess collection beyond 2022. As you mentioned, Pratik, we don't know for how long. But looking at, and it's a very feeble sign, but looking at the uptick, at least in GST collections in the last month, is there hope that as revenues continue to improve, some of the insecurity and acrimony around that shortfall will recede, or is that asking for too much?
No, I think that should happen. If you look at the last month's collection, the first time after the pandemic, the collections have actually been above the corresponding period last year, right? It was 4% above last year's September collection. So, and therefore, I think there are clear signs that economy is coming back to track. And if the collection trend kind of improves, and I was looking at your channel today, earlier today, and a lot of companies were saying that they expect a good festival season to come in. Then definitely, as the collections improve, perhaps the feeling of insecurity at all ends should recede, and finding a solution would be that much easier if that happens. So I'm quite hopeful that will happen, because businesses are coming back on their feet.
Yeah. Pratik is actually talking about a situation which is extremely stressed and tense right now. You can also understand how politically loaded it is. In fact, Rahul Gandhi tweeted earlier about chief ministers who have agreed to the option 1 that the central government has given, and asking why is your CM mortgaging your future. So it's become a very politically divided kind of a situation, and that may be one driving point behind it. Though I must say that many economists have also argued that it is more feasible for either the center to borrow the money and give it to the states, or bear the interest load for the states. So we'll have to see where they work this out and whether it's worked out at all. So far, the two options: one is that the states can borrow under a special window from the RBI, or they go out and borrow in the market. There is no solution as of now, is all we can say. MS Mani, partner Deloitte India, is with us. Mani, thank you for joining as we keep vigil on what is happening in the GST Council meet. Do you want to hazard any guesses, considering that the time for the announcement has already overrun by 2.5 hours?
I'm not really the guessing type, and I really don't believe in astrology either. But what I would say is that, considering the amount of time that has gone into discussing this issue, if you take the last meeting and if you take the current meeting in terms of what's happened today, I think the time spent on this issue indicates how grave the issue is and how difficult it is to come to a conclusion. And in some way, what I'm very happy is that people having reservations are making their views known. Those are being discussed threadbare. And the intention is to arrive at some kind of a consensus, because that is the spirit in which the GST Council has been working all along for the 40 odd meetings that they have had. And they started out somewhere in late 2016. So it's been a 4-year journey which has happened by consensus. And it's been a very good, very effective federal body. And when they are today looking at a revenue shortfall, and the revenue shortfall, I guess, as far as states are concerned and center is concerned, is not only for the compensation cess. That's one part of it. There is a larger issue in respect of the SGST, IGST, CGST collections, which again impact the center and the states. Now, the entire issue, therefore, in respect of states having enough funds to fund their developmental plans, to take care of their healthcare budgets, and equally for the center. I guess the fact that they have been discussing for such a long time indicates the magnitude of the issues that they are discussing. And therefore, if there is a need for one more round of discussion, I would say so be it. It is welcome. And at the end of it, we should have a situation where the states and center, everyone sees eye to eye, everyone sits on the same table, and they come to a rational conclusion. I think it is broadly agreed now that the period of compensation cess is going to be extended. Now, everyone sees it going beyond 2022, and that seems to be fairly obvious to most of us. What businesses at this stage would like to know, especially the businesses which today have a cess on their products applied, how long is going to be? Is it going to be on the same terms and conditions? Is it going to be at the same rates that are applied? Is it going to be on all products the way it is applied? Are there going to be some exemptions after 2022? That is what all businesses would be looking at. But if it's going to take time to come to that discussion, I would say we don't mind waiting at all, as long as it's a decision which gets taken by consensus, as has been the trend in the GST Council for a very long time.
You know, we're just being told that the finance minister is in the building. We may see now her press conference starting in the next couple of minutes or so. So we'll try and get my colleague Ruchi Bhatia on the phone line very quickly if we can, to get a quick word in, if she's gleaned anything on what has gone on in that long meeting before the press conference. But in the meantime, Mani, you've hit the nail on the head. The question is, for how much longer will this, compensation cess be levied? And eventually, as we've discussed before, it's the consumer who pays for it, it's the companies who have to collect it. Will an extension of that time by 3 years or 4 years actually ease the pressure on this entire fight? By the way, you're watching live visuals of the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman just walking in. We're hoping she'll start any minute. Mani, before she starts speaking, you want to quickly address that? Yeah.
For which it is getting extended, and the terms on the basis of which it is getting extended, same terms, new terms, needs to be decided quickly. Because bear in mind that the cess that is levied is, as you rightly said, eventually paid by the consumer, and it passes through a huge value chain. Now, all the people in this value chain need to know, because they have to plan their distribution, they have to make their pricing, they have to do their costing for future, they have to do their demand projections, their business plans, and all of it. And therefore, the sooner most companies, you would be aware, work on a rolling plan, where they work on a 5-year plan now. So if companies which are there are not able to plan their capex cycle because they are not able to do their business plan, which is linked to the extension of.
It was supposed to have been at 7 o'clock, but because the council went on, we couldn't finish and come early. It was a very useful meeting. It was only a continuation of the 42nd council meeting, so this is not the 43rd. 42nd meeting continued, because on that one agenda, which was agenda number 9A, which had to be discussed, which was left inconclusive last time, so we took it up to further continue the discussion. All states spoke. I have heard Minister was with me, Anurag ji was with me, and the Revenue Secretary and his entire team was there. So discussions went on the issue of the borrowing, the extension of the cess, and so on. States had voiced their opinions and fairly today continue to voice. But even with that said, I would say some specific clarifications were asked and they were given also. Many of the clarifications which were asked were on the AG's opinion as regards the borrowing, as regards the council's authority to extend the collection of the cess beyond 5 years. All that was explained as it was discussed, and questions were asked. In fact, I'm very grateful that the council started today with each of the ministers who spoke, recalling my morning's announcements and saying that it was nice of the centre to have given a 50-year interest-free loans. All of them thanked us. Each one before starting their speech did say that. Also, they were happy about the additional fund allocation for capital expenditure. Many of them also appreciated the demand stimulus that we've given through the LTC and also the festival advance. I requested an appeal to the states to say if they ran a similar program of LTC, even they should extend that scheme and provide festival advance so that collectively India's revival post the pandemic would really be given a shot in the arm. So that was also part of the opening statement of many of the ministers. Specific clarifications, as I said, was about the extension of the cess beyond the 5 years. Compensation, how come it would be one amount and why can't it be the full amount? Even that was a bit of a discussion. The calculations varied. Where we had said very clearly it is about 235, there were some calculations given by one or two ministers which said it is only 1,85,000. So if you were anyway going to borrow 1,10,000, why can't you bring in the other 60, 70? Also thinking that the total deficit is only 185 and so on. Well, eventually it was a question of having heard everybody, not just in this meeting, but also in the last two meetings. After all the clarifications were given, I explained very clearly that this GST Council is a body which represents very high authority of the finance ministers of all the states. There has been very intense engagement, not just in this meeting, but also earlier. And as regards the shortfall in the compensation, after all, it is there for everyone to see that the collection of the cess is inadequate for paying the compensation. And that's absolutely apparent for everyone to see. And because it is something which was never envisaged, the shortfall is now going to have to be met by borrowing. Specific question of why the center can't be borrowing it and then giving it to the state was answered, both by the finance secretary and by myself. Center has issued a borrowing calendar. If I go beyond that to borrow, it would immediately jack up the bond yields. The GSEC yields will go up. And if GSEC yields are the ones which are used as benchmark for every other borrowing in the country, the states going for borrowing on any other score, not just the compensation, would end up paying a very high price. The borrowing cost will go up. So will be the borrowing of even the private sector. If the GSEC rate is going to go up because I'm gone beyond my borrowing calendar, it's going to affect everybody's borrowing. And at a time when India is looking for more money to invest, more money to borrow and do business, can we afford that? But it's not going to be that much severe. The impact is not going to be all that much as it would be when the center borrows if the states were to borrow. And even from the first day's meeting, I have been very clearly saying that won't mean a chaotic every state rushing to the market. We shall arrange, we shall facilitate, we shall work it out in such a way that Tarun Bajaj has joined me today exclusively for answering those questions. We shall facilitate in such a way that states are not going to be ending up one state paying very high interest for the borrowing and the other probably being smart enough went to the market and quickly obtained something at a reasonable rate. We'll try to have something done in such a way that all states end up paying fairly equitable rate. That facilitation I have offered from the beginning. So clearly, that was explained, that as to why the center can't borrow. A lot of discussion happened on 292, 293, center borrowing under 292, states borrowing through the help of the center under 293. All this was in detail discussed. Majority of the states, as you know, had opted for option 1. On the one hand, they were repeatedly asking for speedily get us the money. We are fighting corona on the one hand, we also want the revival to happen very quickly. Festivals are coming, we need action in the ground, so help us to borrow as soon as possible. On the other, you had states which kept saying, no, let us decide on the basis of consensus. Let's decide on the basis of consensus because we have not opted for one and we are substantial numbers, so you have to have a consensus, decide how we are going to borrow. And the discussion went on for some time between the states. I was obviously keenly hearing all the arguments. I could end of the meeting summarize that there was no consensus arrived on a matter on which differences exist. The GST Council can certainly take a call on cess, collection of cess, extending the period of collecting the cess, and so on. That was repeatedly reiterated. But among the members themselves, there was this question of, can the GST Council order that either the center borrow or the states do this or that state do it, because every state under 293 has a business to do what it wants about its own borrowing. And the GST Council has been gracious enough in unanimously agreeing to extend the cess beyond 5 years. So if beyond 5 years the cess is being collected to repay the principal and the interest of the entire compensation, not just this compensation or that compensation, but the entire compensation, there is just no dispute. There are differences as to how it has to be borrowed, who's got to be borrowing, but there's no dispute. Every one of us agree that the entire compensation will have to be paid. It will be paid. Every one of us agree that this compensation cannot be paid out of states' other resources. Yes, agreed. Everyone has agreed on that. So there is no dispute. And therefore that was reiterated by us. At least I had to really appeal to all the members saying that there is no dispute, we may have differences. And if the numbers, say 21 who have written, are now saying, we've made a choice, allow us to do what we want with our money. We want to borrow, we'll borrow. So when I concluded, I did say, whilst I respect there's no unanimity, equally, can the council or members of the council stop another state from doing what it wants to do? I put this before the council. If states want to, on the back of having the confidence that the cess is going to pay the borrowing that they will have to undertake now for the shortfall in the compensation, can anyone or the council stop a member from doing that? Can the council stop a member from wanting to borrow and say the cess will go for repaying that borrowing? So on that point, and also very clearly saying, yes, unfortunately we were not able to arrive at a consensus, I appealed to every one of the members to say, quickly we have to give answers to those people who want money in their hands, because they are the ones, all of you all, each state.
All right, we have to take a very short break at this point, but net, there's no consensus yet on the GST Council on how they will go about making up the shortfall in GST compensation cess payable to states. We'll be right back after a very short break with that press conference. Don't go away.
And then what is the shortfall? For that, the council in this meeting itself, because this 42nd meeting was started on, this meeting was held on 5th of October, and today it has been continued. So on 5th of October, this council extended the levy of cess beyond 5 years because the collection is not enough during this period. So therefore, the whatever amounts that gets collected will get paid, and that becomes due to them, and whatever is the protected revenue and whatever is the shortfall, that will get paid because the levy of cess has been extended beyond 5 years, so it will get paid. Now, if the states want money, sooner, then the borrowing will have to be made, and that is why, precisely for that reason, the option one, the options were given, and then the states have given the option, and then based on that, the whichever states have given the option, accordingly, the the Government of India will work with the lending institutions and the states to facilitate the borrowing.
13.
I'm Meghna Mittal from Newsrise. Since there is stalemate in the GST Council regarding the issue, by when do you see the resolution? What are the options? Is there a GOM that could be formed, or how do you see the resolution of the entire issue?
Oh no, there is no unanimity, but the cess has been extended beyond 5 years, and equally, if there are states which want to go and borrow, we are willing to facilitate. I have also kept completely the option open for states to come and talk if they want to wanting to ask me any more questions. I'm willing to engage with every state.
6.
Good evening, ma'am. Ruchi Bhatia from ET Now. Ma'am, since you are saying that the states that so far have opted for option one, they will be allowed to go ahead and borrow funds. Just wanted to...
1 minute, Ruchi. Let's be clear on one thing. I don't think anyone can allow or disallow a state from what they want to do.
Right.
We have to be clear on that. It was more on the question of discussing with a sense of, being sure that the cess will get extended or not. There were also views about why the center can't borrow, for which I've given the answer. So I want that thought that somebody can stop. In fact, many of the states compared it with the UN Security Council. They said, is this a Security Council where somebody will veto and the rest of them will have to obey? Some states did ask that also. So the GST Council, and I made it a point to say this, I don't think the Council's intent is to stop anybody. So let's understand that.
Ma'am, just a clarification on that. How soon will we proceed with the borrowing for states that have already agreed for option one? And secondly, in case the other dissenting states knock the doors of the apex court, what is going to be our next step of action to ensure that either their concerns are dealt with, or will we see this battle now going to the courts?
I want you all to not use words like battle. There wasn't any battle there. There wasn't any battle there, and GST Council is, I think, one of those very respected federal institutions. a lot of discussion happens. Definitely there can be differences. But where a unanimity is not there, that doesn't mean there's going to be a dispute. Let's be clear on that. And as regards what is going to happen about borrowing, which are the states which want to come and access, Tarun will explain it to you, how soon he can provide. And I'm not answering any questions. So what happens if they go to court? I'm sorry, no, yeah. I don't expect a dispute. I've explained as to why there is no dispute. And therefore, I've also said, whoever wants to talk, please talk. But as many states said in the council, further talking, holding other states will only make them appear very poorly in their own back home states. Because they come to the GST Council thinking that there will be some answers given to them. They can't go back now to repeatedly say, sorry, the council couldn't arrive at a consensus, so till then I'm not doing any expenditure, whether it is pandemic, whether it is development, or whether anything else. We are answerable even to them. Does our conscience allow us to hold back states which have opted for something, saying we'll have to hold you back till such a time a consensus is arrived at? I did ask this also as a question. Does the collective conscience of the council, in its quest for unanimity, which I also strive for, which I also strive to arrive at, and that is why 42nd meeting has had an extended meeting today. All of us try to keep with that spirit of consensus in decision making. But is it going to be till such a time that the consensus is arrived at, states are going to be held back from, if they want to go ahead, borrowing? And especially when the borrowing comes under Article 293, it is the state's right to decide what it wants to do. Even this was raised. So, battle, dispute.
20.
But Tarun, can you please explain?
I'll talk to you about the borrowing part only. The Honorable FM had explained to you in great detail as to why the center should not borrow and the state should borrow. I may also add here that the 15th Finance Commission had given an interim award last year, and when the award was given, the COVID was nowhere near that. So there were certain amounts to be given to the states based on a percentage basis, and there are certain amounts which are to be given to the states on the basis of the actual quantum. For example, the revenue deficit grants are mentioned as the amount. The SGRF grants are mentioned as an amount. The local body grants come as an amount. So the center has actually carried out those responsibilities in spite of the fact that COVID has also affected the center's revenues. And though our revenues went down and the center does not even have the option of a compensation on account of lowering of GST, but on the understanding or on the basis that the states are at the forefront of fighting COVID, that assistance was given and should have been given. We have already increased our borrowing borrowing amount from 7.8 to 12 lakh crores, and in the first half of this year, we have borrowed more than what we had borrowed in the whole of the last year. So, as she had explained to you, I will only emphasize again that the extra borrowing or the strain on the central government fiscal will have a greater bearing on the macros, and for the interest of all the players in the system, it is better that we try not to expand the central fiscal deficit beyond a point. Having said that, let me also belabor with you to explain what is this whole issue about. The amount has to be paid, the GST compensation has to be paid from this compensation cess amount. The compensation cess is levied on certain products which have a higher GST rate. That amount comes into the consolidated fund, goes to the public account, and from there it is distributed to these various states depending on how much is the need of each state or what is the deficit of each state. Now, when there is a shortage in the compensation cess, and the compensation cess has been decided to be taken ahead from July 2022 onwards, therefore, it has been mentioned that amount should be borrowed and given to the states to fight COVID at this very difficult time. But the point that I want to belabor with you, emphasize to you, is that both the interest and the principal will be prepaid from the cess amount, compensation cess amount. That money will not be paid either by the central resources or by the state resources. So the money will come from the compensation cess, and this compensation cess will be collected from July 2022 onwards till all the compensation cess principal which has been borrowed has been repaid, all the interest on that amount has been paid, and also the less compensation which is paid for the current year and maybe for the next year has also been paid. So it is, I would say, a third party or a third person who's actually taking the burden of both the payment of the principal and the interest. So this issue needs to be looked at from that point of view. Again, having said that, I would say we have not done detailed calculations, but I can say that from July 22, we'll start having money because there'll be no compensation which would become payable to the states on account of the shortfall in July onwards. Only the previous backlog would have to be paid. So that money would become available for payment of interest, for payment of principal, for payment of the less compensation cess that has been paid to the states. So in our view, the repayment of the loan that we take in this year and the next year would happen from the third year onwards, the third year, fourth year, fifth year. So there is no need to compare the rates at which we will borrow with the 10-year GSEC. For example, the 2-year borrowing rate for the center is sub 5%, and for the borrowing rate for the center for 5 years is sub 6%. So based on these indicative figures, the actual figures will be known only once those bonds are floated and they are picked up by the market. So it will be much lower than what may be the expectation of some people, because the tenor of the loan would be much lesser. So when the states come to us, we will actually work with them, try and calculate or estimate as to the shortfall that each state would face and what is the compensation that would become available to that state, and work out based on these timings. And as the FM has mentioned, it will be our effort to ensure that the states get a good rate, though the amount is again to be paid back from the compensation cess. I'm actually repeating this point again and again because whatever is coming in the media, this understanding needs to go that the resources of the states are intact, the resources of the center would be intact of whatever is collected. This amount will be paid back from the cess, compensation cess that we'll collect, and the center is committed to help the states to borrow at the minimum price working along with RBI. So I think a large number of states are now ready for this kind of a system to be operated, and once they actually come with the exact figures, so that would be worked out for each of the states. So I think this is what needs to be understood and emphasized in this whole scheme of things, that the issue which is being raised is not something that I'm paying from my pocket, but it is a separate pocket that is there that will be used to pay for all these amounts.
Last question, 21.
Ma'am Shishir, just wanted to clarify one thing. As Mr. Bajaj was saying, that entire interest will be paid out from the compensation cess beyond June 2022. Does this mean that under the option 2, when it was said that out of 2,35,000 crore, interest has to be borne by state and the principal amount to be paid out of the compensation cess?
I don't think at this stage we need to talk about other options. They're all out now. Nobody has opted for 2, so there's no point in talking about it.
Okay. And the other thing is that does this mean that now all those states, the 21 states who are ready to go for option 1, they will be permitted to go for that? And those who are not, they will be given time to come back, and if they want to avail the scheme, they can do that, ma'am. Am I correct, ma'am?
We are open to anyone who wants us to facilitate any loan. Option 1, already a lot of people have said it, and they even today said, please, tomorrow morning we are approaching. So we are ready to deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you, friends.
All right, so no consensus yet on what will be the way forward. It's as simple as this. States that have opted for option 1, which is using a special window facilitated by the RBI, can go ahead. There are 21 of those. The others can take their time to decide what they want to do. I want to take views from Pratik Jain and Mr. Mani, who have been listening into that entire press conference. Mani, let me come to you first. What do you make of it?
I think, as we were saying earlier, Tamanna, this indicates the difficulties that we have in a federal body like GST Council, which is represented both by center and states. And the fact that states are having a resource crunch at this point of time is certainly appreciated. Equally, the fact that the center can't write out a check and give it to states because it also has its own share of resource issues is also very, very evident. So to my mind, the fact that there was no consensus emerging at the end of the meeting is something on which possibly we should not be glossing upon. What we should be glossing upon, as the FM said in the press conference, is, yes, there may be a divergence of views, but there are no disputes. Equally, the fact that many of the states have already opted for the compensation model suggested in the past meetings by the council seems to indicate that the tap is going to get on from tomorrow, as she said. So if many of the states go ahead and start borrowing, it is something which will encourage the other states who may have reservations also to come forward in future. Equally, I found it very interesting that there was a mention of the fact that when we are saying that the cess will get extended beyond July 2022, it is only for the purpose of facilitating the repayment of the borrowings, the principal and the interest. It's not to levy a new cess altogether. While the impact on the consumer would be the same, it would not significantly undergo any changes. The fact remains, therefore, that the period for which the cess would get extended may be significantly reduced. It may not be a long period. I would not even be surprised even if the rates of compensation cess that are levied now go down in future. Depending on the amount of money that they have to raise, depending on what is the need for money at that period of time, if the intention of extending the cess is merely to repay the loans that are taken for this period of 2 years, because bear in mind that all the compensation cess dues of the states till FY20 have already been settled by the center. We are discussing only FY21 and FY22. And for these 2 years, whatever is the deficit in the states, which the center had promised to make good to them, that is the only amount which will need to be borrowed and therefore imposed as a cess in future. So to me, there is some clarity which seems to be emerging. It would have been wonderful if there had been a consensus. But since consensus has been eluding us, based on whatever is the views of many of the states today, let's go ahead and move on.
Okay, so Pratik, if I were to put it very simply, at the end of all of this, the FM have said that the states who want to take option 1 are going ahead. Those who don't want to, please figure out what you want to do, but the rest are moving ahead. Like she said clearly that nobody has gone for option number 2. I also want to get your take on the explanation which has been given by the Finance Minister and Tarun Bajaj about why states have to borrow rather than center. saying that the center borrowing will actually push up borrowing costs for everyone. What did you make of that argument?
Yeah, so before I come to that, clearly now option 2 is ruled out, right? So now I think there is center saying that, look, we don't need a consensus, right? The law is very clear that you have to pay by cess. GST Council has extended the period of cess. Whatever cess we collect, we can either pay to the states or we can use some part of that cess to pay for the borrowing. Now, I think it will lead to some complications because let's assume that 21 states go for borrowing, other 10 or whatever 9 states don't, and then you keep collecting compensation cess, let's say after 2022. How do you service that? How do you use that cess? Do you first pay the principal and the interest because there is an interest component also which needs to be paid, or you first distribute it to the states and then because interest will have to be paid in any case, right? So how will that be used? In that sense is something which need to be worked out. So I think it's clear that we are not going for voting unless, of course, states further stress in that. And we are just leaving that to the states to do that. I'm not an expert on the other question that you asked, but I would like to mention that of course the center has seems to have a reasonable basis to suggest that they should not be borrowing. And more importantly, I think what they're trying to say is the responsibility of the center is only to ensure that whatever cess is collected is given to states. And therefore, they are not responsible other than the cess collection to pay the compensation. And therefore, principally, if before that cess is distributed, the states want money, then it's only fair that they borrow and not the center. Apart from the the economic logic that they use, I think there somewhere I also saw earlier that if there was a difference between the GSEC rate and the actual borrowing cost, then center had agreed to give the subsidy to states up to 0.5% or so. So I think what they're saying is, I will help you out to get this money, but really I am not responsible beyond the cess which I'm collecting. And that's the constitutional framework. That's the law of the land. One will have to see, how the future sort of turns on. But yes,
I don't want to hazard a guess right now. Yes. I don't want to hazard a guess right now, but I don't know if the 10 opposition states are going to let this go so easily. We'll have to wait and see if they fall in line, if they can wait to delay getting those funds either by borrowing one way or the other to prove a political point, or will they let it go? Will this go to any court? We'll have to wait and see. But Mani, I want to get your take on the logic basically being given why center can't borrow and states should borrow. They're saying that this will push up GSEC yields, it will push up borrowing costs for everyone at a time when the economy really can't afford it. Do you buy that argument? Does it make sense to you?
I guess the way it was explained was that if the center borrows and the center is in the market for various kinds of borrowings, whereas possibly states are in the market for lower amounts and lower durations of borrowing. So overall, over a period of time, when we have a very good trade going on in GSECs, and I believe now there is a plan also to introduce GSECs on the retail side, even retail investors possibly in future can invest in GSECs. I guess we should take what was mentioned during the press conference to say that the objective of the center not going in for a borrowing and the states going in for a borrowing, with the center agreeing to do everything which was necessary to facilitate the state's borrowing, should just be taken at face value and we need to go ahead with it. Because at the end of the day, the borrowings that the center is required to undertake for facilitating various projects is very large compared to the states. And they would therefore have a better view in terms of what would be the yields on those borrowing, how the interest rates would get pushed up, how it would impact the economic cycle, how it would impact the sovereign credit ratings. I would say that at a broad level, the explanations that the center gave in respect of either they borrowing or the states borrowing, and the fact that they were willing to facilitate and take all steps to help the states borrow, should be taken at face value. And on the basis of that, a call should be taken by the states who still have some reservations to discuss those with the center and then decide on a way forward. The only point I would like to mention, Tamanna, is look, all of this is causing a bit of business uncertainty. And my concern is more on the uncertainties that businesses face. While all of this is very important, very significant, very critical, no doubts on that. Businesses need to plan. And for someone who is planning a capex and the business plan is linked to that capex, the capex depends on the pricing of the product and the pricing of the product depends on the indirect tax. This is something, therefore, which needs to get decided. To what period are we going to extend the cess? Is it going to be at the same rate? Is it going to be at a different rate? Is it going to be on the same products? Are there going to be any changes in the products? For instance, in respect of small cars, are we going to see cesses being reduced from 22? All of these decisions should be taken very soon and communicated to business so that they can make their future business plans.
Absolutely. Well, on the other end, I don't know if we've seen the end of this center-state fight yet. We'll have to wait and see how states respond tomorrow onwards. Thank you so much, Mani and Pratik, for staying with us through this special coverage.